Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Conversations in Pop Culture, where I have with me Mike Mauro, the creator, writer, and artist on the independent comic Atom Bug, which has 3 issues. 2 of them technically are out, and then the third one's going to be out on the internet, I believe, in July. So, welcome to the show.
Hey, how you doing, Andrew? By the way, Mauro, not Morano.
Mauro, my bad, my
That's okay.
bad. Names are not my strong suit. I stand corrected.
That's okay. Full disclosure to anybody streaming this from the start, I am on zero sleep. I don't know what kind of shape you're in, Andrew, but I just recently wrapped up some schoolwork. I'm in grad school, and it's been kicking me in the rear for a while now. I am on zero sleep, so I probably will make a couple of slip-ups myself, so don't worry about it. It's okay. But Michael Mauro, simple, easy. Starts with an M, ends with an O.
I got it. I should have known that because he told me before,
That's
and
all right.
I dropped the ball. So I stand corrected.
We'll just say you work hard too and you're tired.
We'll go with that. But I'll take the L and I'll walk away politely.
Everybody gets one.
So now a lot of my audience is probably hearing about Atom Bug for the first time, and I think that's the best place how to start because that's kind of your baby, it's your comic. And what is the basic premise so that everybody gets an idea of what we're going to be talking about before we dive a little deeper into it?
Absolutely, sure. Well, yeah, you're right. It's my passion project. It's an idea, an old idea that I had originally in high school, and just ever since then, it hasn't really come around to fruition only up until the last couple of years. It's first and foremost, it's an action genre webcomic that I've been posting on my own website at atombug.com online for the last 2 years. So it's free, and what I do is I delay the content. So if you're a Patreon user, I have a small Patreon up and coming. If you're a Patreon user, you get the content a little early, sometimes a little extras, and it eventually becomes free. So it's kind of like Netflix. You go see it in theaters, and then eventually, over time, it becomes available on streaming. I don't know if we're going to have movie theaters for much longer, given the current events. But yeah, it's first and foremost a webcomic in the action genre, and it is, for the most part, a teen and up audience. It's not really violent. It's comic book action, but I wouldn't say it's for little kids either. But it bases itself on the premise of the good versus evil cliche, and I'll say that, and that's fine because really, it's tough to come up with truly original content. But you'll hear me say this a lot through this interview: is it's not necessarily the good versus evil, but it's how you tell the story in between. And like I said, you're going to hear me touch on that a while because it's not the most original, groundbreaking story where you go, wow, this has never been done before. This is so experimental. But as I said, because it was such an older idea, I really wanted to just develop this. And I'm going back to my roots when I was a kid. And thus, here we are now with it.
Yeah, and one of the things about this, just to give people a further idea here, is that it's got a Sonic the Hedgehog vibe to it. When I read it, it definitely reminded me of Sonic Adventure 2. And that entire gameplay and even elements of it and that style. And I like that style a lot. And I think that's underrated tremendously. And we see stories like that, but we don't really see comics like that anymore for a while. And we
Glad you
have
said that.
I guess, overworldlies. I think they're the bad guys are, and the defendants are the good guys. And that's kind of the division between the two groups. And so going further into this, what was that like to really get to live that vibe out?
Well, this is what happened was, I'm glad you said Sonic because, yeah, that's first and foremost what people compare it to. It's a good thing and a bad thing. Sonic it is basically, I grew up on Sonic the Hedgehog. I'm pretty sure you did too. We couldn't escape it. It was the number one selling video game for a while, for the number one system for a while. It was the early 90s. The 16-bit era had just come around. We're fresh off the heels of Nintendo at the golden age of home gaming. Arcades are still thriving. Sega was kicking ass in the arcades up until only the last maybe decade, where every game they came out with was just an awesome hit. So they were on a roll. Sonic was everywhere. So it started off with the game, and I'm glad you said Sonic Adventure 2 because by that time I had already backed off on following Sonic. I got older. High school was really the prime time for me, so Sonic the Hedgehog was part of it. A little later was Skylanders, and then I went back to reading older works, books like Bone. I'm not sure if you know he's a
Jeff
little white
Smith.
guy with that travels around. And it's a black and white comic. It's not a kid's book from what I remember, and it's been a while. But it's
Yeah.
not adult themed either. It's just it's in between. So it's an adventure storyline. So there's Bones, Skylanders, Sonic, a couple of other influences, a little bit of Crash Bandicoot, some Spyro. So Sonic seems to have, as the oldest property of all of them, seems to have the forefront of what Atom Bug is related to when people, see it, get exposed to it. The story does have similar points, and it's only because, yeah, at the time when I came up with the same idea for my own, original characters, story, and art, Sonic was a big influence. Here is the catch. I was mad with the entire license. As, as you know, I mean, when you grow up with something and it gets destroyed or demolished or changed, I'm not going to say which properties have been like that recently. There's been a lot, and whether or not you're on side A, B, a purist, a realist, an elitist, it's neither here nor there. It's something that affects you because you grew up with that property, that IP. And when it gets molded somewhere that is not, your comfort zone, it's almost like a violation. And I don't want to say that like I want to ruin the word because that's a very strong word to use. But at the same time, you grow up with something, you become someone that was just influenced by the things around you, and pop culture's obviously a big deal for that. No more in the 80s or 90s than today. So when Sonic, when Sonic 1, Sonic 2, Sonic 3, Sonic CD, I think I couldn't, own them all. But after a while, there was the cartoons. I watched those, and then the Archie comics came along, and something happened. Not only did I get older, but these comics went back in time. They were treating their audience like little 6-year-olds, and I just thought, I need a story that relates, that I can follow a little easier. You got the cheesy writing from the Archie comics. You got the terrible animation from the comics. I mean, from the cartoon series. It was okay, but I just, growing up with the original 3 games, I just thought they could have done so much better, and they started losing their grip on the quality control of the license. And I'm getting older, so I'm starting to get into X-Men, Spider-Man, and just older properties, just something that an older teen in the mid '90s would enjoy. Whereas Sonic was a little before that. I stopped watching, a lot of cartoons. I mean, Saturday morning cartoons were awesome; they always will be. Doesn't matter how old you are. If you remember them, you're of age. You're good enough for those. So, but a lot of the stuff I did back off from, and Sonic was one of them. And that was sad because I grew up with it. And I just thought that Sonic, they could push the edge a little more. They could push the envelope a little more. We don't want adult-oriented storylines in a Sonic cartoon, a comic book, or a game, but we can get a little edgier with what we had then. And along with the slip in the quality control and that terrible game, that terrible remake from 2006 with the infamous kiss, that was just it was time to really say, I don't care how much fans will relate my work to Sonic's. You can read my story and go, there was some extra thought put into this, and it really does not give you the cringe vibe. If it does, I'm sorry, you can't please everybody. But at the same time, when you pick up an Archie comic, you go, oh, it's cool, I want to buy it because it says Sonic. And then you open the book and you go, nope, I cannot do this. I'm reading a kid's book and it just doesn't feel right. It's a step away from a coloring book. So I basically created Atom Bug out of spite for Sonic. And that's the ultimate story is I wanted a storyline that I could follow that could be a little edgier for more of a teen audience, teen and up, like I had stated earlier, who the book is for. And, Sonic went the way of the dodo. Nowadays, Sonic's awesome, don't get me wrong. But this is also, we're talking late 90s, so this is over 20 years ago. And back then, Sonic had fallen off the bandwagon. There's no doubt about it. Like, the audience, whether it was that terrible game from 2006 to the comics, to the cartoons. It just wasn't a winning formula anymore, and it forgot who it was. It was even a game, I think. I'm not sure if it was canceled or not, and I think if it wasn't, it may have been a Japanese only release. But Sonic wasn't even fast in this one Sonic game. The game was not centered around speed. Amazing. The one thing that makes Sonic is speed. Just like Mega Man gives him all the various weapons and abilities to evolve from the bosses he defeats, the other robots. There's a hook there, and they lost it. And that, with the other things I had mentioned before, it just ruined everything for me. And that's where this book comes from. I had to take over. I had to do it myself, and I did. So I hope that answers your question as far as where did you come up with this? Well, let me tell you.
Yeah, and let's talk about that, because
Sure,
clearly
yeah.
that this goes to go deeper, and I think we're going to get into a little bit more of the story here. That where this starts is that we don't get why the enemy, the overworldlies,
Otherworlders.
otherworlders, I stand corrected yet again, come in and are wanting to take over this planet. And that's not really relevant to the story in many ways, because now we have a group of people called the Defendants, led by Adam Bug and a variety of other species, who are kind of put against the wall and are fighting for their survival and dealing with an invader in their backyard. And that's a very different story than a Sonic story. That's a very real story, and while we're not going rated R, we are dealing with real consequences. And I think
Right.
that's something that's a nice touch there, but we
Right.
also get that against a very colorful background that Sonic
Sure.
games have. So it's kind of like we get that step above, but we're not into
Right. And it's
rated
strange
M
because
material, for lack of a better word
right,
to use
exactly.
video
And
game
it's
language.
right. It's strange because they came out with that game Shadow the Hedgehog, and it looked really cool. I wanted to play it, even though I was kind of what is this? But he's got a cannon, and they instituted guns apparently into this game, and that's not a bad thing. It really isn't. Adam Bug has guns. It does. But the way Shadow the Hedgehog did it, in response to what you just said about pushing the envelope a little more, where it can still be for young kids, but it doesn't have to be so cringeworthy to overly develop for kids and nobody else. With Shadow the Hedgehog, the United States military was involved in the storyline. There were humans now, which it's okay, but once you got the military involved, it started becoming really strange. And the way they did it, they probably could have pulled it off because they did touch on that in the movie, the recent movie. But with Shadow the Hedgehog, it just seems strange where they're going to gun down a hedgehog with M16s. And I just thought, you know what? I'm the one, me. I'm the guy that would have done something similar, but M16s and they're shooting a hedgehog. I go, no, guys, it's almost like they responded, they heard me, and they wanted to make a game for me, but they did it in such a way where even I said, listen, we don't need AR-15s, M16s, and he's got a cannon of sorts. That's kind of cool, but we got to stay true to the brand here. And what else did they have in that? Tanks, I think, and it was just really over the top. Quite bizarre. It was really bizarre. Where, like I said, they tried to come up with a little something darker, but it was unnecessary. They could have done it any other way than that. And it's just a shame because that was probably the one time that the license could have gotten somewhere in the direction that I had wanted it. I would have then said, Adam Bug may not be a good idea because of the direction Sonic is taking. It's almost like Sonic happened. I made Adam Bug because I didn't like where Sonic was. Now, all of a sudden, the license is getting too close to Adam Bug. Only Sonic is known. Adam Bug isn't. And that would have scared me to death. But it didn't happen. And the game sold okay. But, I thought about pushing the envelope, but I didn't mean blowing it out of proportion. So, when it comes to gunshots and stuff like that, it's action. It's just like walking into an arcade and playing a light gun game. There's no gore everywhere. Well, some of them there are, don't get me wrong. But for the most part, those fun Sega and Namco light gun games of the 90s, they were just fun. You picked up a pastel blue or pink pistol and you played games like Time Crisis, and it was fun action. And it didn't matter that you were shooting polygonal characters. There was no blood anywhere. It was just fun, action-oriented. Meanwhile, you're picking up this gun, and there's bullet shells everywhere. It's not a big deal because it's not portrayed over the top. So I incorporated a lot of that into Atom Bug, where yeah, there's guns and stuff like that, explosions. The theme is a little more adult oriented, but it's how I tell the story. Once again, see, I told you I'd say that. It's how I tell it, and it touches on some adult themes, but it doesn't get to the point where the audience is going, I don't think this is a good idea. I don't know where this book is. What? I don't want people to do that. I want them to pick it up and go, what's this? It looks like everything. It looks like this, and this. They'll categorize it in their head, what it's similar to, the art style. And then at the end of the book, they'll go, you know what? Sure, it reminds me of something else. This was fun. When's the next one coming out? And that's the idea. So, and with Sonic, it really isn't that different from Atom Bug. You'd think I'd defend my storyline and say, I've got unique plot points. Overall, good versus evil at its core is the central theme. I like how you put that, where the defendants of Proton Planet have their backs against the wall and are fighting for survival. If you think about it, Sonic the Hedgehog isn't that much different. They just don't use the term survival. They don't use the term extinction. They don't use the term, they definitely don't say genocide or anything like that. I'm not saying I use that word either, but these are things that can spark some really, deep themes, thematic correlations. And but if you think about it, the storylines are not that much different. It's just the plot points in between. So where the Otherworlders in my book, in Atom Bug, came from may not seem important right now, but believe me, it's a series, and we're definitely going to touch on that. For Sonic the Hedgehog, Dr. Robotnik's just he's just the guy that you almost love to hate and hate to love, and he's just there to roboticize you. I still don't really know why. He just wants to take over. I mean, it's always about power and control in just about every plot that you can think of. Very few plot lines contain no conflict. You can do it, but a lot of people just seem to have that protagonist-antagonist what's the word I'm looking for? Dynamic. And that, at the end of the day, is good, bad, fight. So the substance to Atom Bug's storyline isn't the thickest, but in between, the characters are likable. I'd like to think the action is plentiful as an action comic, and they have personalities without pissing you off or getting you under your skin. Atom Bug doesn't eat chili dogs. He doesn't need to. It's not important. He doesn't need to collect rings. That was more of a video game mechanic. Not to knock on Sonic. Like I said, that's how I started this whole thing. But there are things that he doesn't need that we don't need to get into.
So even to talk about that, though, because one of the nice things about Atom Bug is that there is humor interjected in this entire story, but the humor isn't over the top. So I had somebody on, and they wrote a comic, and it's about conquesting hell, and there's a lot of dick jokes and fart jokes.
All right.
And there's a lot of stuff in there, but also there's a main story as well. And with this, the humor's in there, there's funny lines, there's funny components, but I don't feel like they detract from the story or take away from the story or impede upon the story. And I think that's a really nice touch, because I've read comics, and you've probably read comics, that the humor is either doesn't meet the bar it needs to meet, or it goes over the bar it needs to meet. And then what winds up happening is that it hurts the book. And what I found with yours is that it sort of meets right at that bar where it needs to be. So what is that like to interject that and get to play with that? Because it's sort of a fine line, and it's finessed very well.
Right. And that's, once again, I'm glad you hit on that too, that the book isn't serious to the point where it's depressing. We don't want that, because at the end of the day, they're cute, cartoonish looking characters. So they do have to have some fun story, some fun personalities to match. So yeah, of course there's humor, there's gotta be, but it's not forced. That's the word. It's not forced. Where in Sonic, they kind of they had to pander to little kids at one point. And I just went, well, then they did their job, because I don't want to read this anymore. I can't take it. And, getting older or not, it's just not what I expect in, a quality title. So, but yeah, no, the humor is definitely there. It's just more of that's the humor, I guess, comes from a lot of writers like David Michelini, and the whole Marvel crew from the 90s. So the Spider-Man books, the X-Men books, and a little bit of Image too, where the humor it's a little dark, but nothing that some audiences would get and go, "Ooh, I can't believe they got away with that." And sometimes that'll happen in movies where you'll get something obviously a younger audience doesn't, but it's just a matter of how much do you want to get away with? Because the youngsters these days. I'm getting really old from starting to say youngsters, but kids these days, they know more and more every day because they grew up with things that you and I necessarily didn't. I had a cell phone in high school, but I'll tell you what, it was the size of this mouse, and that. So, but not trying to get off track here. It's just that the personalities have to match the characters. So even though I wanted to push the envelope a little, it's the kind of humor that's more for 20-year-olds, 24-year-olds, as opposed to little kids that are the bottom of the barrel humor.
Yeah, and just to give a little bit more background, and hopefully I'm not ruining anything here. So we have issue 1, and we're introduced to Atom Bug, and then in issue 2 that's out there, that's also available on your website. We get more of a conflict and more of a showdown, and well, pretty much a gigantic bomb ship, for lack of a better word, is about to bomb Atom Bug, and they so-and-so kidnap, I guess, Atom Bug's assistant slash sidekick. And he's a funny character, or the Bug is a funny character of what it is, and adds a lot of dynamic to it, very much like Tails adds to Sonic's character.
Yeah, it's fine. It's okay. It's obvious. I don't hide it, and that's what it is I don't hide it. He's got a sidekick. All right?
And then, just to add even more, that sidekick sort of gets kidnapped, and we're introduced to a rival, and that's kind of where issue 2 ends, and I'm not ruining anything, so what can people expect with issue 3? Because I know issue 3 is done. It's just not available for the public. Right. I want to say.
As I said, since the webcomic's free, this is not a secret. I mean, you may have, I'm not saying ruined it, but you may have, if anything, teased the audience. It's fine. It's free. Go online and read it. I don't know if you want to put a link in the description of the, but yeah, it's there for you guys. That's why I draw. That's why I create this stuff. So there's no need to hold back on something that's already online. Issue 3 has been done for a little while, and the Kickstarter that's coming up is basically a trade paperback collection of issues 1, 2, and then the third book, which is currently unreleased. It's going to be part of the trade paperback, so you're going to have the 3 issues combined, as well as the extras like the concept art. And the Kickstarter is starting June 1st. Hopefully we'll see it come to light of day, since it's not a guarantee. But I wanted to leave audiences on a cliffhanger. It's the first 3 issues trade paperback, which also is the first story arc to Atom Bug. I dropped the audience into just action. There's not a lot of storyline because I didn't feel like I wanted to I didn't want to burden anybody with too many details. You can find them in issue 1 if you want. But I wanted to start off with a huge battle. What can we pull off? What can I do? What can my colorist accomplish with deadlines? Let's push the envelope, and then let's pull back and really peel off the layers like an onion to see what kind of storyline we're dealing with here. Issue 1, plenty of details to look at on the surface. It's just a matter of, where are we going with this? And if you stick around as a reader, you'll see that, it's starting to get a little otherworldly, should I say. It's not just good guy and bad guy anymore. Now, this happened because this happened, and that's not good for us. Well, then again, maybe it is. And at the end of the day, that's the defendants versus the otherworlders. At the end of issue 2, it's not going too well for them because they're technologically outmatched. The otherworlders, when they arrived, would have annihilated all the defendants and taken over like that, except they crashed by accident. If you pay attention to the first book, they crash landed. They didn't land peacefully with all the technology and all the toys. They only had a fraction of that, which gave the defendants a fighting chance and leveled the playing field. It's almost like a video game, the game mechanics. How do you fight an alien race? Well, they want to take over, but they crash landed. So most of their toys are gone or broken, and they have to just make what they can up from parts. And that's essentially how they fight. Even still, their numbers are pretty massive, and they've done a good job at wiping out a lot of the defendants. So they're fighting an uphill battle, which coincides with Atom Bug, his humor, and all the other characters' his humor. It kind of paints a picture where if you don't laugh once in a while, you're just constantly reminded that you're close to extinction. That's not good. So you got to laugh once in a while, knowing that your back is against the wall. I even think I say something like that in issue 2. But so the humor stems from the harsh reality that, yeah, we're kind of getting our asses kicked here and the end is near. We might as well go out with a bang, all or nothing. And if I tell a joke on the way, screw it. So at the end of issue 2, yeah, they're not doing too hot. Issue 3, obviously I can't reveal too much, but I mean, if you think about, the cliche ending, I mean, who wins at the end, and it's the first story arc, they've got some pretty staggering odds to deal with. And at the end of issue 2, you just got to wonder, how the hell are they going to overcome all this? I mean, some people may be able to theorize, figure it out, and hopefully the plot's good enough that it doesn't. They can't just post some fan fiction and go, "I know the ending," but it's such a differential power shift that just turns on their head almost in an instant, and it sets everything up for issue 4, where we're going to change things up a little bit because you've had the action from issues 1, 2, and 3, but now we need to discover, well, who really is Atom Bug? Who was he like, or what was he like beforehand? What about relatives? What about backstory? How are they shadow forming the planet? I know these are a lot of questions people have, and that's why I just got to say stick around and it will be answered. It's just got to come, there's only so much you can put out in a comic book with, 9 defendants remaining, otherworlders, their technology. I don't want to assault the reader with all the details. It's all will be explained, and it's not going to be one of those series, like a TV series or a comic book series, where you just cannot get an answer to save your life. We're going to be answering everything relatively soon. The storyline can evolve without, revealing the one ace up its sleeve. This is a bad example, but something like either Game of Thrones and the X-Files. You couldn't find an answer if you tried, and people started losing interest. And then I kind of proved everybody right when I said the shows kind of went with a whimper, and it was a story, which is what makes the property. It went nowhere. So you have to reveal something to the audience. You can't keep reeling them in like that. You have to give them answers. So I promise with this series, I won't be holding anything back. You'll hear about it. You'll know, okay, this is happening. Finally. All right, well, what next? Well, I'll show you. And that's how we're going to do things. So it's going to be a pretty forgiving storyline where I'm not leaving you so off base where you have to, find out what happens next. Otherwise, you're not going to sleep at night. It's going to be fun, and it's simpler. It doesn't take itself too seriously. And with the Kickstarter coming out, if the book launches and is, succeeds, then you get to find out the storyline, or you just watch it for free on the website when it eventually gets released. You win either way.
Let's talk about that, because clearly you have a Kickstarter coming out, and you also have a Patreon out there, and it's free on the website. So I kind of want to break some of that down a little bit. So
Sure.
What made you want to do it more as a webtoon hosted by yourself? I don't know if you're affiliated with any other websites, but what made you go that direction? Because a lot of people choose different ways to produce comics now. There's webtoons, there's Patreon exclusive stuff, there's
Tapastic is another one.
that too, digital formats, trying to get it printed just to a Kickstarter direct,
Sure,
trying
right.
to sell it to a big publisher or even a small one at that. So
Right now, that's a very scary option with Diamond and how they're not taking any orders in. That may have changed maybe last night, and this is already dated information. But yeah,
distribution's an issue, and it's going to be an issue for the next 6 months. Just on a business level, and I tend to be more in the comic collecting world, and there's a lot of discussions where while a bunch of these companies are coming out, their production levels are going to be lesser. If you look at Punchline, that thing was supposed to happen in April, and that's been delayed now till June. So there's a lot of things going on with that, and it affects the collector's market, but that's a whole different discussion for anybody who's interested in that.
Yeah,
But
that really is a debate in itself as to where we're headed, what's going on with the current, events, and I don't want to bring it up too much because there's only so much before you go. Look, either you release the book or you don't. It's not like you're impacted that much that you
yeah,
can't get something done. I mean, we're not moving mountains here; it's a comic book. But
so
I do understand at the same time, distribution can be a pain if you're going
so
print.
talking about that, and then that's why I say, and that's why I'm really curious about this webtoon, because that is an elimination, at least to test the market to some degree. And I know people like having a physical copy, but what made you want to do it as a webtoon first? 'Cause that's
It's
interesting.
a Yeah, absolutely. No, it's there's strengths and weaknesses to just about every business model you launch. The theme that's similar across is that it's good to have a buffer of sorts, especially with the webcomic, because if it takes off, you're going to want your audiences, pleased on time every time. I have a system where I release a book about a year, and doing it myself is slow, especially with grad school. I'm only one person. I have help, but now I have help anyway. I took the first book and a half on by myself. I did it, but it's not easy. You got the writing, the artwork. You have to worry about continuity. Then you got to check yourself from grammar to the backgrounds. Everything makes sense. So it's really just for a small 32 or 20 something page comic book, it is almost like moving mountains. So I take that back. But in this case, I'm starting off small and avoiding webtoon because of that buffer, or should I say lack of. Webtoon is very demanding, and I think maybe Tapastic is to, or Tapas, whatever their name is. Not to, I'm sorry, I can't remember their name off the top of their head right now. It's the other Webtoon, is what people say. Um, they're very strict, and the audience, they get hungry fast. They want more. What's next? What's next? You can't keep up, and then they lose interest. And since you're basically a small fish in the sea of indie comics, web comics, and brand new licenses, they just hop over to something else and just pick that up just as easily. So if you have a fan base, you have to keep them, and that means content. Content. It's almost like the algorithm on Instagram. You're nobody unless you're posting constantly, and when you're doing all the artwork yourself and you really try to have that level of quality, then industry standard quality, it's tough. So you have to set a schedule and meet that schedule every time. So webtoons is definitely not out of the question. I'm finding out that the action genre is it's not bad, but it's not doing the best right now. It's teen romance that people are reading these days that love webcomics, and that's great. But I looked at some of these storylines, and you want to talk about similar properties, they're all in high school, they're all in love, and there's always a conflict of interest. Now, if you want cliche, that's cliche. And anime style or not, it just seems so similar to me. I don't understand how they're doing this to the point where it's so popular that you can't give an action series it's the light at the time of day with dynamic camera angles and awesome fight scenes and explosions, whereas it's just drama. I don't understand it, but also is the fact that webtoon, I need that buffer. So if I see there's an audience on webtoon for Atom Bug in the future, in a couple of years, give or take, sure, it's not off the table. The print model comes from just okay, well, just like you said, testing the audience. If you like this, would you want to own it in print? And that's what this is about. The Kickstarter could do phenomenal. It might not. It's an experiment, and to see if there is a home for it as a book, because you can't beat a book in print. It's the oldest medium, from scrolls to the invention of paper to cave drawings. It's pretty to look at. It's physical. You can take it with you. And even though digital comics, you can store thousands of them on your phone, I don't think they're taking on like they could or should have. If you're commuting on, if you're in New York City and you're commuting on the train, you're going to be bored, but you've also got games. There's something aesthetically pleasing about having an actual comic book that just you can't beat it. And then you want to take care of it, and then you start a collection. That's how this whole medium really started. Was they were just cheap comics that became valuable, and just like trading cards and stamps, it became a game. Who has what? Can I get that? I'll trade you for this, or can I buy that? Or just finding out when something is new and coming out that you can't get. It's the whole fear of missing out concept. Do you want it in print? Okay, printing costs money, so you have to give for a little take, and vice versa. And that's where the Kickstarter comes in. But there's nothing off the table. It's a webcomic for free first because it has to be. There's too much competition out there. So if it starts doing good, then we might move over to print, a different service like Tapas or Webtoon. It might even go exclusive because I know some of the hot titles, they say, you know what, don't even host your own website. We'll pay for the hosting. You put it on with us and become exclusive. You get an exclusivity deal. That would be very nice. But, until the teen romance stories and dramas die down, or, we start moving away from that, I'm not sure if Adam Bug has a home right now on one of those, areas. And of course, the buffer as well, because as one person, it's tough to consistently put out the quality artwork.
So let's talk about that Kickstarter, because that's kind of one of the things that I think's driving a lot of the production. So one of the things about Kickstarter, and I think you did it, your Kickstarter was set up this way, and a lot of people are doing it. And so I'm curious about this, as well as just everything that's going on with your Kickstarter and everything in that realm. You funded, I think, the first 2 issues on Kickstarter?
The first one, yeah.
And so my understanding is that it was done beforehand, and because it was obviously the web comic, and then you probably funded it because you wanted it to print it versus having the project being half done and then finishing it and then getting it out there. And so what was that like? Because you ran into some troubles on your first attempt, and then your second attempt did very well.
Sure. Kickstarter is a funny, fickle beast. In 2008, we had the recession, and crowdfunding was new. I remember it. I remember Kickstarter taking off. If you want something, just everybody get in on it. Okay, that sounds like something so simple. Why didn't we do this earlier? Well, if you think about it, the internet hasn't been around that long. So an idea like this, being born out of necessity when businesses were failing, brick and mortars were closing, especially with, the current danger of comic shops, which was no different, 10, 12 years ago. It was definitely different. But here's the problem with Kickstarter. I like having my content done beforehand or very close to done, because this is, where I'm going with this.
I know exactly where you're going with this. I know exactly.
And if you know it and I know it, then every backer that wants to put their hard American dollar in my pocket knows it too.
So before we get too far ahead, explain the phenomenon that we're talking about, because I want to make sure everybody else understands it, because some people don't.
You have a great idea and you raise a lot of money because, oh, wow, there's diagrams, there's concepts of it, there's a prototype, and it just looks like it's going to solve half your daily problems Monday through Friday and sometimes Saturday. I'm backing that. I want it, and I want it ASAP. And then something happens. They make $500,000 on it. They sometimes reach $1 million. If it's a video game, there's one out there that's raised how many? Nearly $1 billion. And I'm not exaggerating, even though I don't know the exact number. It's up there. That has been going on for over a decade. The project has switched hands so many times, and it keeps getting more funding on top of the initial Kickstarter. But there's one problem with that very, very title. You know the one I'm talking about as well as the audience, if they're a gamer at all or know anything about the scams and scandals that have gone on, is that it was the same thing in 2008, where a lot of campaigns that were either making wonder inventions or awesome properties, from comic books to games to figures to just a backpack that could do something another one didn't. After they raised their funding, they disappeared, or they just played devil's advocate until everybody gave up. And the problem with Kickstarter is they're not policing their own business model to the point where you can really trust it at first glance. If you look up Kickstarter, they've got their reputation dinged. And I'm so sorry if Kickstarter is watching this, but I'm right. Their reputation kind of went by the wayside. They even got the bad name Kick Scammer. And then people wouldn't back any project.
So I'll tell a story that'll highlight this on a lesser level. So I backed a project, and project eventually came out 2 years later. There's all these rewards, and I backed it for $60. And I think this is going to highlight a really good point, and I think you know exactly where I'm going with this. But
Hmm.
what wound up happening is that apparently book came damaged, person never responded. Book is readable, really enjoyed the book, happy to support it. Find out, I go look up on Midtown Comics, and this isn't blasting Midtown by any stretch of the imagination. I love Midtown. I order every month from them, and they
Hell
get a
yeah.
lot of my money every single year. But book is selling for $22 on Midtown, brand new. I backed this
Wow.
project for $60. Was promised all these rewards. Guy then says, "Oh, a bunch of people canceled on me. A bunch of people did this. A bunch of people weren't processed." Took 2 years.
Did you get a special edition variant of some
No,
sort?
no, no, no. It was a
Same
hardcover.
book?
No, thank you. Nothing like that. And well, now that guy's not doing any other projects, and I think his impress that he was creating has died because his reputation has been run through the mud. Now,
Sure.
conversely, Ryan Brown is running a Kickstarter. Ryan Brown is a very famous artist, and
Hmm.
so with Kickstarter, that's something that I'm starting to see is that now a lot of people are saying, okay, who's running this project and what is their reputation?
Hmm.
And
And well,
so,
yeah, and the reputation of the platform that they're backing. So that's two entities you have to be,
and
wary
and
of.
so and
All right.
so with that project, and this is why I bring this up, is that Ryan
Yeah.
Brown and Charles Soule are running Curse Words, the omnibus version. I
Right.
trust Ryan Brown over this other guy who I'm not going to name. And
Right.
so that's what I mean, in which that Kickstarter was successful on your end, on your
Hmm.
second attempt, and you did well with it. But I'm just curious, really, your entire take on it, because there are good things, there are bad things, and we're now starting to see Kickstarter being used in a different way. And I think some of that scammer stuff is still there because we see
Yeah.
those issues
Along
where,
with Patreon and even just YouTube subs, just donating money. People are doing it just because people are asking for money. It's like, well, where's your product? What's your deal? you know, and Twitch is notorious for that. They're just making money just because they're asking for it. I've never been raised in that sort of environment where I can just be like, yeah, I need money for rent this month. Subscribe to my Patreon, and I like do stuff for you when I feel like it. It just doesn't. I don't know how they thrive, and if they don't eventually, then obviously things come full circle. It does frustrate you a little when you try to make something special for someone, or something that you think someone would enjoy. Maybe not, but you try it, and you just see people just scamming people online. Kickstarter doesn't do anything about it. Twitch has a policy. YouTube has a policy that you can use and abuse to skirt the system. There's a couple of things going on right now that I don't want to name to get into that aspect, but yeah, it's just really taking the system for a spin. I like to have the content done beforehand. There's little red flags when you're looking for something on Kickstarter and you see it. Does the creator show his face? If he doesn't, well, does he have a website? Well, if he does, great. Then there's a blueprint, so to speak. I stand behind my book, and although things can happen currently in this case, maybe the printer's delayed because of a backlog of orders, because his business has been shut down by the governor of his state. Little things like that can obviously happen. Even to me, I'll try to have that buffer of time to get the product to the printer with that buffer, that word again, to make sure I have enough time to account for some of these issues. But things happen. Overall, though, it's not going to be where I submarine and you don't hear from me for 6 months only to resurface at a different Kickstarter, forgetting you for the previous product I told you I was going to make. What was that one? There is one I will name. It was a Kickstarter. It was a video game. It was Mighty Number Nine. It was a Mega Man clone. It was supposed to be the next best thing, essentially the spiritual successor to Mega Man. Capcom didn't care about Mega Man anymore. Didn't want to do any reboots or remakes or any next gen stuff for Mega Man. I don't know why. Same thing with Konami and Castlevania. There's just, you're not seeing those titles anymore, even though they're hungry for it. Look at Resident Evil. But in this case, one of the people behind Mega Man, maybe not necessarily the original creator, that was debatable. I forget his name, but he basically made a spiritual successor to Mega Man. Got all this funding for it, and not only did he not deliver the product right away, it was a train wreck. and he actually started other crowdfunding campaigns without even fulfilling the first one. And we're not talking about to $600 that he raised, or he raised $1,000. All right, fine, just keep an eye on this guy and don't back his projects in the future. We're talking $250,000, or $750,000, if not more, over time that he's siphoned from people that just want to relive those nostalgic franchises that we've talked about at the beginning. And this is what they do, and it's a shame. Kickstarter doesn't really help much either. There's no protection system. So going into this thing, yeah, I want to get my face out there. I want to talk to you as well as anybody willing to listen that, hey, I've got a comic book. I made a thing. It's going to happen if you want it to.
Yeah, and even to talk about that, I mean, everybody has a Kickstarter horror story, and clearly there needs to be policing. And so, just to even talk about that on the business side, when you put out your Kickstarter, what factors into what you offer as a reward and what you put on your project bio and the story? Because clearly, one of the things when I had my issue, and I haven't spoken about it much, is that it took me a year and a half to come back to Kickstarter to back my second project. And so what is that like? Because clearly somebody might have gotten burned before. Yeah, and they're looking at your project and then they're saying, well, I'm kind of on the fence. So how do you reassure, especially going into your project that's launching on June 1st?
Well, Kickstarter does that. They tell you, it's possible that you could get burned. Nothing's set in stone, and you're backing, your inventor, your creator, your role model, your whatever, on the idea that he's going to deliver. I don't really.
So how do you create trust?
Right, and that's what it is. Is Kickstarter says that's up to you, and leaving you vulnerable like that. It's almost like, well, Kickstarter doesn't really, I mean, they may have changed over time. I don't want to turn this podcast into a bashing Kickstarter session.
I don't want to either. So
that's okay. Well, that's the thing is we want to be on Kickstarter, and they want us as well. They've been losing a little bit of money lately because a lot of things have been shaken up, but they haven't been financially doing the best lately. So they want projects like mine on there as well. It's just a matter of, you have to approve and be careful, who you let in. Is the book ready yet? Can you prove it? If it's a game, is there gameplay footage? A lot of Kickstarters didn't, that promised video games, no actual gameplay. It's a red flag.
So now I'm curious. So yours is launching on June 1st.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about that because definitely you have right now a decent track record of your first one was fully funded and funded your book, and you got your books out to those people. And then I don't think book 2 or book 3 were done on Kickstarter, but they're now being collected into a trade that's happening. And I'm assuming your Kickstarter is going to be 30 days on Kickstarter?
No, it's 14. It's 14 because it's these things take a lot of effort and time. So instead of asking for a monumental amount over the course of 30 days, I wanted to do something smaller, manageable, and between 14 or 30 days, I may, I don't know what the right answer is, but I know that for a 30-day campaign, to make it worth my while, I'd want to make it, something substantial. And at this level, I want to make sure I grow a fan base first. So I want to do something smaller, lighter. If this is the wrong direction, well, then I'm going to learn fast in 14 days. But it's only a 2-week-long Kickstarter. I've made enough noise. I'll be continuing to do that with the fan base I have. Their email lists, and I've got a subscription sign up on my site where I'll get you, an email list. Every once in a while, I send out the shout outs. Hey, this is going on. Kickstarter's coming up. Stay tuned. So I keep in touch on social media. So if you want it, you'll find it if you're part of the fan base. But as far as the rewards are concerned, you've got the main trade paperback, and you can have the floppies as well because they still exist, obviously. A poster, some stretch goals I have in mind where if it funds, we can keep going and add to the book, whether it's an expanded 3D weapons guide, which is something that already comes with the trade paperback. It's a 3D weapons guide, concept sketches. Since the license, the Atom Bug property, has been around for a little bit. There's older stuff that I can tie in to show people what it started as, what it became. The gripe with Sonic the Hedgehog, I might do a little blurb about that. there's something to make it where it's a nice comprehensive book that you can say, all right, that was a fun story. Here's the behind the scenes. And that's almost commonplace now with any Kickstarter, trade paperback, or comic collection, is the behind the scenes stuff afterwards. Because people want to know, well, how did you do this? Where did you come from? And what's next? So the thing funds, I'll gladly stick a preview in there of issue 4. If the thing funds, I'll gladly upgrade to premium gloss paper. If it gets a moderate following, it very well may. If people like the story and latch onto the trailer video I made, then they may. I don't know about a hardcover. It's not that thick of a book. It's not an encyclopedia. It's just the first 3 issues. But I've got plenty of options. And overall, just to answer your question, it's just always good to have your face out there, your name, so people can say, look, the guy exists. He's not a fake alias. He's got the material done. He just held it up. And if it's not real, then, well, we know who he is, and at least we can take a gamble on an idea that he has. But having it completed first, getting the interviews done, posting it on social media, getting the people to follow your campaign beforehand is all very important. I would have liked to have done it a little sooner because June 1st is right around the corner. Grad school. That's my defense there.
Well, this is going to be in front of at least 300 people in the next 3 days, so that's a good start for you.
Then I really hope 300 people at least read the book for free online, and that's another thing too. Is it's there, it's out there, and there's a similar book, maybe not similar. It's called Scurry. By Max Smith, phenomenal artist. Apples to oranges, but his content is free as well, and it's very similar to the Secret of Nim, the Rats of Nim storyline. Very similar. Rats survive in an apocalyptic world where humans aren't around anymore, and they're left to do what they want, but that's not necessarily a good thing. Fighting for resources and survival, but his content's free, and it's quality, AAA, grade A, industry standard quality. He's a professional and then some. It's all free on his website. I've got all the books. Why? Because A, it's phenomenal art. B, there's the aesthetic of having the comic books in hand or the graphic novels in hand. And C, the guy, if he's putting it out for free, you got to help him out if you want to keep reading it. It's just a moral, choice. So that's another thing is my content's out there. It's a newer series. It's only been around for a couple of years, but it's growing. So if you want to check it out, the 300 people that may see this can at least try. And if they like what they read, they can further the series. The one hook is that, yes, issue 3 is the new, the reason to buy the book overall, unless, especially if you're an established fan already, you buy the book, even if you have the first 2. The third one's new anyway. So you kind of win-win as opposed to duplicating, a trade paperback if you have all the floppies. So you can pick and choose what you want. So it's great for new and old audiences, which is why I picked the first 3 issues, because it's the first complete story arc. So it's a good launching point.
So even to talk about that, when is the expected date? And I know COVID-19 sort of messes things up a little bit, and I think people understand that,
Sure. Yeah. Well,
most comic fans understand that things are a little bit messed up and it might take a month extra. But when is the expected date for...
That's what's good about it. I don't use that as a crutch. I'm just saying September. Since the book is done already, there's no reason to be late unless, there's a worldwide shortage of paper, like there was with toilet paper. If regular paper turns really rare, then all right, we may have an issue. But I'm setting a date for September. I'd like to be earlier, but I don't want to, once again, I don't want to disappoint. So I'll say September. If you know that now, you'll say September. Okay, well, it's not that far away. Enjoy your summer. Go to the beach. You don't need to worry about my book. It's coming. So get out there in the sun, especially since a lot of us we're starting to come out of our shells here with this whole quarantine thing. I look like a ghost. Normally I have a little more of a natural tan, but September, as soon as school gets back into session, September, it starts getting cooler again in the more northern states. That's when the book will arrive at your doorstep in a nice white envelope, and you can go, oh wow, I remember this. Cool. And then it's a nice surprise at the end of the summer. But that gives me enough time, at least, June, July, August. The printing process, since it's not a huge book, it's not complicated. It's not a hardcover. It doesn't have holograms or any of that, gimmicky '90s Marvel stuff.
So we're gonna leave it there. But where can people find your Kickstarter before we talk about some COVID-19 stuff?
Well, if we can, I don't know what's best, maybe leaving a link in the description because I have a pre-launch page that people can follow the campaign on.
I will leave a link in the comment section.
Okay, if you want to just message me and I'll send that.
Yeah, we'll get that taken care of. But
Okay,
for
good.
those who just, what should they type in on Kickstarter if they're just browsing really quickly on June
Atom Bug.
1st?
ATOMBUG space, 2 words, Atom Bug. I'll even, here you go. People can see it.
So if you're looking for the Kickstarter, type in Atom Pug and it will get you to where you need to be, everybody.
It should get you.
For
Yeah,
those
it's
watching.
not active until the 1st, so that link may be important, but it's a really long link. I know the audience doesn't want me to read on here, so if http:// we're not doing that, guys. Your time is dying.
So everybody knows where to go. But I do want to talk, and we're going to reiterate this in a few minutes here, but I do want to talk about COVID-19 from both a fan perspective and a creator perspective, because it's no secret. And I know we're changing gears slightly into maybe a little bit of a downturn, but it's no secret that has torpedoed the entire world.
Yeah.
It's destroyed entertainment. We were saying before that movie theaters might not be coming back at all or ever for that matter.
The handshake may become extinct. That's weird.
Yeah, and we might go into just tapping feet, which is what Orange Cassidy invented. That's a wrestling reference. If anybody doesn't know who that is, look it up on YouTube and your world will be completely changed, I promise you. It might be better than sex, but that's a different discussion completely. But anyhow, getting back to COVID-19, as I was saying, it definitely decimated the comic world. And so I'm just curious what your take is on that from both a fan as well as a creative and how you've been affected by that.
Politics aside, the comics industry hasn't been doing good even before this. Comic shops were closing down before this, and some of them evolved where they had Magic the Gathering tournaments and card games and tabletop games. So it was still an excuse to get out of your chair and go somewhere other than having, the books shipped to you or getting it digital, in which case the mom and pop shops started, declining. So some evolved. And, a little shout out to Dragon's Lair comic store in Austin, Texas. I used to live there, and it's one of the greatest comic book stores of all time. I never really participated with tabletop games, but it was a fun place to go to, and it just felt like you could be a kid in these four walls, and it was okay. You could pick up a Spider-Man comic book at 38 years old, and you'd be fine. It was a nice little breath of fresh air. I love that comic book store. So some evolved to have that business model though, where they'd have comic books, but then also the Dungeons and Dragons or tabletop gaming. But the whole business model as a whole is dying. And I hate to say it. It's the same thing that would happen to arcades over the last 10 years. I miss my arcades. I miss comic book shops, but they're getting tougher and more niche. So that was pre-COVID-19. Post-COVID, I mean, they're gonna have to get even more creative if they want to survive. They have to reach out to the indie guys and say, if you have a webcomic, we need it in print. And, either we'll sponsor you or we'll have events surrounding you, but they're going to have to put in that extra legwork because we're here saying, I want to get these books out. Someone is going to enjoy them. Okay. It may not take off like Sonic the Hedgehog did or Skylanders did or Bone or Sam and Max or any of those great properties I used to read back then. It may not, but someone out there is looking for this book. I just don't know who it is. If you want a retailer to get into be the middle person, the talent scouting is a possibility, but you're going to have to do something. It's kind of like the arcades started selling alcohol and they turned into this thing called Dave and Buster's. Phenomenal, right? And they survived. So
to talk about that a little bit, because clearly there is a rise in indie content, rise in indie comics. Kickstarter, even though we were sort of disparaging them a little bit, and rightfully so to some degree, has definitely helped out with that. Things like Indiegogo, Patreon, Having web comics out there, having digital stuff has also helped out there, as well as technology, because 15 years ago, just give a little back history, printing was not as effective. To print an
Right.
indie comic, you were printing on shitty paper. And then
Newsprint. Yeah.
fast forward 15 years, you could put an indie comic next to a DC comic book or a Marvel book, and the art can be just as good. The
Sure.
paper can be just as good, if not better. And the story and what's interesting and just fascinating stuff is being put out there. And then
You got a
QR codes.
five-person team on a passion project that comes out with one book, and you put it next to just a normal DC or Marvel book, they're in trouble because you've got a small, light team with all the tools that DC and Marvel has, and more time. So yeah, the indie scene is definitely a force to be reckoned with. It's not about the big two anymore, and the times have to evolve with that for comic shops to stay alive, comic books, actual print books to stay alive. So yeah.
And so I'm just curious on that front, and even on the con scene with you, because I don't know how many cons you do with Adam Bug and pushing it out there, and I know that a lot of indie creators do it, and there's a mixture in that realm as well, where some people love it and they love selling, but then there's also horror stories and nightmare stories about that as well. So I don't know where you stand on that with from the
I,
business side even to the safety side, because let's be realistic, I'm not feeling too comfortable and confident in a lot of these cons reopening
yeah.
so quickly.
Well, they already have a name for it. It's called the con crud or the nerd flu.
And that was
it's
before all this shit.
Exactly. That was before everything. A lot of this has already been happening. It has nothing to do with a pandemic, especially, it's comic books and games, not to belittle the medium, but I mean, is friggin' virus coming around killing people in the entire world over on a global scale? Who cares about comics and video games necessarily right about now? This was all happening before that, so it's not new. Wash your hands, and people don't do it. Just general hygiene, wipe the game controllers. This is how stuff like that spreads. I wasn't really big on cons. I did a couple back in Austin, and they generally just didn't have. I didn't get the I didn't get enough out of them, and they're expensive. So there's table sharing. There's 1 out of 3 day passes you can do as an exhibitor, but there's little tricks of the trade to minimize costs, but it still hurts because it saps your entire weekend. And some people look forward to that being an exhibitor. Some people it's a lot of work, and for someone like me, I'm sorry guys, I need to have an audience first, and I know that's not necessarily how it's done. But with things now in mind, there's also social media, the interviews. Would I ever do a con again? Yeah, absolutely. But they're expensive. A lot of these, it's all about the cosplay, and the masses gravitate towards the cosplay contests as opposed to the artist
Not
alley.
even the
So it's a fight for space.
cosplay contests, the cosplay girls.
Right.
It's
One thing
it's
we
it's
right.
just to talk about this, because and I
Sure.
love cosplayers. I've
Who
interviewed a bunch
doesn't?
of them,
Right.
and they're
Right.
great. But Dave Dorman was speaking
But
about it, and Matt Hawkins was talking about it, and Matt Hawkins told this story on my podcast. And just to reiterate the point, there's this woman, and she had like 10-foot wings, and she was standing right in front of his table, and he
uh,
politely asked her, and he gave her a free comic. He said, "Hey, could you do me a solid? Can you move
yeah.
over about 5 feet
Can
because
you
you're
fold
blocking
your
my
wings up?
table?" And the
Yeah.
person was totally cool with it, and they're like, "Oh, of course," but there's an issue with it, and I know this because I'm a panelist,
Okay.
and so when I'm not getting paid at the con, I get a free badge and I enjoy myself. I go to like one or two a
Right. Free
year,
badge. See. Yeah. Right.
and I love doing it, but it's a lot of work. And people, I've had a panel where I've had one person in, and it feels horrific, and then I've had 250 people. The craziest
Yeah.
thing is for
At the top of the
15
world, right?
$15 on Facebook ads gets me more attention and more action than that entire room. It's just crazy.
Exactly. It's hit or miss. So that's why, I'd have to really scope out a specific con. Some do better than others. Some are more for maybe, cyberpunk type people. Others is for maybe the anthro crowd. Sometimes it's a little bit of both. Dragon Con is in Atlanta, I believe, and it's a pretty big con. That may be one I'm looking into, but it all comes down to the price, travel, food. I try to take care of my body because I'm getting older and I don't want to eat, necessarily the worst. We're not 20 years old anymore. I mean, you may still be, I don't know. But I can't drink Red Bulls and Monsters and be held together by caffeine and Scotch tape. I can't do it, especially if I'm trying to be clear and concise with, uh, informing people about my brand. So it's a lot. So I would do it, but I'm not going to have a schedule that has me booked solid because I also like to work on this book as an artist again, too. You have to prioritize. So if I can get a break in the costs, if they seek me out, or if I advertise, that's possible. Or maybe just make a really big deal out of it and just announce it 6 months ahead of time. Sure, not a problem. This is if cons still survive. Virtual cons would be easier. I don't know. Savannah here has Savannah Comic Con. I was going to go to Savannah Comic Con this year because it's small and local, and that was going to be the con to get me back, my feet wet back into the scene again to promote, Atom Bug. This happened, so that kind of derailed me. So I'm glad you brought that up because I was thinking, at least Savannah Comic Con this year, possibly Dragon Con, but we'll see next year. And if I do, everybody will know, obviously. Otherwise, what's the point? But it's just a matter of cost and to see if hopefully this health thing doesn't come back next year.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to end. And obviously, there's a lot of uncertainties, but I do want to give you an opportunity to promote yourself. Where can people find the Kickstarter again? What can they type into Kickstarter? Rob's going to put up that link. What is your social media? Where can people
the website
pick up those books? Things like that.
atombug.com.
What was the website?
The website is atombug.com. That's the first and foremost place. There's no link to the Kickstarter yet, but if you go on Kickstarter, I'll actually, if you've got literally precious seconds, I can just finally, Kickstarter.com, and I'll search for Atom Bug to see if a campaign shows up before it's active. We'll know right now. I don't know if you're.
We're about to find out.
Yeah, exactly.
But in the meanwhile, while you're looking, do you have a Twitter? Do you have a Facebook page? Because people want to check that stuff out.
Absolutely. What I'll do is I'll pull up one of my emails that has it itemized, and I can just rattle them off to you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
As well as, can people buy issues 1 and 2 still out there? And how can they find that, or can they get them digital beyond if they want to actually pay for it? Because people are big on that.
There are still copies that are floating around in the archives, if you will. Oh, yeah, I have them. Let's get through the Kickstarter first.
Great.
You would pay more for them than you would if I was selling them on my website. I do want to set up an online shop, and these will become available. These are still the first printing editions. After that, they're going to be a little different. Some tonal changes in the artwork, maybe a little difference here and there. But these are the first print runs. They're still around. But let's do the Kickstarter first. And if you buy one on Kickstarter and you go on the online shop afterwards, it'll be the same price. We're not going to do that, a $60 switcheroo you mentioned earlier. So nothing crazy like that. But if you want the individual floppies, they'll be available on the Kickstarter and afterwards. And then more to come as I let you know, hey, I finally got the online shop. It's up. Atombug.com is the main source for all of that. But for Facebook, it's /AtomBugComic. Instagram is Atom_Bug. Twitter is Atom_Bug again. And that's pretty much it. I have a Tumblr, but it really just recycles the same updates that I have from Instagram and Twitter. Instagram's going to be your top one. It's Atom_Bug. I try to keep it all streamlined, but Facebook, there is an Atom_Bug already. I think it's some guy that sells sneakers with custom artwork on them. It's strange. It's talent, but it's not exactly what you'd think of trying to visit, an indie action webcomic. But and then atombug.com, like I said, is the main one. So as far as Kickstarter is concerned, we're all going to learn something here. It doesn't pull up a campaign that it hasn't been launched yet. So that link's going to be very important if anybody wants to follow the campaign when it launches on Monday. So if we can put that link somewhere, let me know. I've got it ready.
Yeah, let's get that link up there somewhere.
All right. I have that right here. Okay. Where am I? Where would you like me to paste it to?
So we're about to do something fun. So can you
Uh-oh.
get on Facebook right now?
Yeah,
Add it right and go to my page, Pop Anime Comments. We're doing something live and behind the scenes a little bit, and
we're gonna
add it right
experiment.
into the comments section on the video.
Okay. So you pop anime comics.
Exactly. So that everybody
Yeah,
can figure this out, see where it's at. I'm going to put that thing up right up top.
yeah. Sorry for the guerrilla marketing. I'm new to the streaming thing, and I just didn't know what was um, in the comics or as a new post.
Just add it into the comments under the video.
Okay. The video of me looking down. Let's see.
It's how we do things.
Yeah, listen, that's fine. If they want to see my actual face picking up my head, I guess they'll just have to watch the thing. Let's see all comments. All right.
Copy and paste that right in there.
Exactly. Michael Mauro. And yeah, of course, if you guys want to follow me on Facebook as well, I have an Adam Bug, the Adam Bug comic forward
So
slash Adam Bug
that's
comic.
the link.
Yeah.
And so the link is live. Everybody can see it. It's kind of covering part of me and cover you at the moment, but it's part of this broadcast now. It's very cool. And that's where you can go get it. It'll also be in the comments down below. And when this launches, just for everybody who's watching and checking it out, one of the things that I'll put up is that I will put up the link to it launching on my page as well as on my personal Facebook for everybody checking it out. So for those who watch it all the way through, you got the link. It's in the comment sections down below. And I would just like to say thank you for being on, because this was a lot of fun. You know, we were wanting to do this for, I think, 2 weeks or so, or possibly 3.
Yeah, I just had a lot of assignments for grad school, for art school, and they take just a lot of time. So thanks for letting me finish them first, so I can appropriately, string a sentence together without, falling over from lack of sleep.
It's all good because I've been crazy busy too in the last month, in which I think I've done approximately, I think you're my 31st on Facebook Live. So
Okay.
I've
Wow.
done, or maybe not my 31st on Facebook Live, but definitely my 27th or 28th.
Hell yeah, for being productive when we're stuck at home, right?
Exactly. And again, I just want to say thank you because obviously, this is good for you, it's good for me, and as I've been saying to everybody else, and you actually have a Kickstarter, that you got to support indie right now because a lot of people are getting hammered across the board, especially in the indie comic market. And one of the things about indie comics versus the big guys, as I like to call them, and the professionals, is that you don't get a page rate. You don't get, a book rate. You get what is put into the book and whatever sells, and minus your printing and whatever you value your labor at, is then pulled out of this project. And if you like it and you like what you're seeing, then you got to support it, because if you don't support it, this stuff goes away. And
hosting isn't cheap. To have your own site with no ads, that's what my business model is. I don't have ads because it's not fair to anybody that's trying to just read the content. So that's where I ask humbly if anybody can support the book. The website stays up, the hosting cost pays for the printing, and hopefully it gets the series off to a nice humble beginning. And I have some marketing materials for you. If you'd like, just send me a DM, and then just any signage is basically what I'm saying.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think we're going to end on that note.
Fantastic.